Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to retaliate against Iran for its missile attack on Israel on Tuesday. An explosion was heard in Beirut in the early hours on Wednesday as the Israeli military continued its attacks on Lebanon.
Hurricane Helene wreaked havoc across North Carolina while Taiwan braces for Typhoon Krathon.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the preparation of a new security agreement amid intensified fighting in the country's east. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to retaliate against Iran for its missile attack on Israel on Tuesday evening, calling it a big mistake. Iran launched almost 200 missiles into Israel and said the attack was legal, rational, and legitimate.
הכלל שקבענו, מי שתוקף אותנו, אנחנו תוקפים אותו. זה נכון בכל מקום כשאנחנו נלחמים בציר הרשע. זה נכון ליהודה ושומרון, זה נכון לעזה, ללבנון, לתימן, לסוריה, וזה נכון גם לאיראן. אנחנו נלחמים בציר הרשע בכל מקום.
Leaders across the world quickly condemned the attack on Israel. U.S. President Joe Biden said that the U.S. had anticipated Iran's attack and worked with Israel in its defense.
It's also a testament to intensive planning between the United States and Israel to anticipate and defend against the brazen attack we expected. Make no mistake, the United States is fully supportive of Israel.
The UK's Prime Minister Keir Starmer joined Biden in his condemnation, as well as EU top diplomat Joseph Borrell, who had earlier urged Israel to show restraint in its attacks on Lebanon. An explosion was heard in Beirut in the early hours on Wednesday as the Israeli military continued its attacks on Lebanon just hours after Iran launched almost 200 missiles into Israel. Earlier, residents in some areas of the southern suburbs of the Lebanese capital were warned to evacuate their homes. IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari said the operational capabilities of the Israeli Air Force have not been affected by Iran's missile strikes, and it will carry out more strikes in the Middle East overnight.
Our defensive and offensive capabilities are at the highest levels of readiness. Our operational plans are ready. We will respond wherever, whenever, and however we choose, in accordance with the directive of the government of Israel.
Meanwhile, government supporters in Tehran celebrated Iran's missile attack against Israel on Tuesday evening, waving Iranian, Lebanese, and Hezbollah flags and holding portraits of slain Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. People were also seen celebrating in parts of Gaza and the West Bank.
At least 130 people have died and hundreds more are still missing after Hurricane Helene tore through the U.S. state of North Carolina in recent days. The storm also bogged down roads, caused blackouts and left people stranded. This is the worst flooding the state has seen in a century, with rainfall estimates in some areas topping more than 61 centimetres. Government officials and volunteers have been working to deliver supplies by air, truck, and even mule to the state's Appalachian towns and surrounding communities. In East Asia, Taiwan closed schools and offices and evacuated hundreds from vulnerable areas ahead of the strong Typhoon Krathon expected to make landfall on Wednesday. The Defence Ministry said nearly 40,000 troops have been deployed to prepare for the expected rescue efforts.
As Russian attacks in eastern Ukraine intensify, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Ukraine and its allies are set to sign a new security agreement in an upcoming meeting in Ramstein, Germany. This comes after Zelensky presented Ukraine's victory plan to the U.S. presidential candidates in a recent visit in pursuit of continuing financial and military support.
Готуємось також і до підписання ще однієї безпекової угоди для України вже 27-ї. Провів сьогодні ставку кілька ключових питань. Перше – комплектування бригад. Друге – зброя і техніка для наших воїнів, закупівля і постачання.
In recent days, the Russian army has been pushing Ukrainian troops backward in eastern areas, causing widespread destruction. Multiple people were wounded as Russia launched several attacks on the Kherson and Sumy regions. In Kherson, one person died in the attacks. Drone footage shows further destruction in the eastern Ukrainian town of Vuhledar, where Ukrainian forces are under severe pressure. Zelensky said it is necessary to determine how to increase pressure on the Russian Federation at the meeting in Ramstein on 12 October.
At least 6 people have been killed and 3 wounded in a Russian artillery strike on a market in the southern Ukrainian city of Kherson. According to the regional governor, the market was hit as shoppers were making their way around the stalls.
Це мгновення виход і через 3-4 секунди прильот. Началась паніка у людей, всі почали тікати, уїжджати. Я сам завівся та й поїхав. Бо взагалі, та це дуже страшно, це дуже страшно.
Russian forces have also attacked the Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia, killing 1 person and injuring 6 others. Meanwhile, Russia has released footage of what it says shows an artillery gun attacking Ukrainian positions in the Kursk region and rockets firing on Ukrainian targets in South Donetsk. It comes as a ceremony is held in Kyiv to commemorate fallen soldiers on the Day of Defenders of Ukraine, with a minute of silence led by President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Former Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte has officially taken over as Secretary-General of NATO. It comes at a time of great global upheaval and a crushing war on the continent. Rutte paid tribute to Norwegian Jens Stoltenberg, who served in the role for a record 10 years. He says he agrees that Ukraine should use Western weapons, including long-range ones, to target Russian military sites.
Let's not forget, Ukraine is fighting a war of self-defense. And that means that Ukraine has the right to defend itself. And as we know, international law, and according to international law, this right does not end at the border. So that means that supporting Ukraine's right to self-defense means that it is also possible for them to strike legitimate targets on the aggressor's territory. At the end, it's up to each ally to determine its support for Ukraine.
Rutte reiterated NATO's statement that China is a key enabler of Russia through sanctions circumvention and supply of goods to aid its military production. He also said the world cannot give in to Putin's nuclear threats.
We do not see any imminent threat of nuclear weapons being used. And that's what I want to say about this at this moment, because let him talk about his nuclear arsenal. He wants us also to discuss his nuclear arsenal. And I think we shouldn't. We should just acknowledge the fact that clearly there is no imminent threat of nuclear weapons being used. And that is important. And generally, not just on nuclear, but more generally, if you would give in to Putin's threats, that would set a precedent. That using military force allows a country to get what it wants. And we cannot do that.
Mark Rutte says he'll push for even more defence spending and persist in the alliance's support for Ukraine. He said his country, the Netherlands, knows only too well the threat that Russia poses to the world, especially after the MH17 passenger plane was shot down by proxy Russian forces, killing nearly 300 people, many of them Dutch. Shona Murray, Euronews, NATO.
The victory of Austria's far-right Freedom Party, FPÖ, at the Sunday's elections marks another win for Euroscepticism in Europe. It's the first time since the Second World War the far-right has finished first in an election. Despite narrowly winning the election, the FPÖ faces challenges forming a coalition, with the other major parties refusing to work with its controversial leader, Herbert Kickl.
What they're very vocal about is anti-migration. So this is was very strong in the past decades and again in the campaign. And one can speculate, one still has to really look at these results and also look at at polls, opinion polls, why people voted the way they voted. But what we hear is that this migration course, pushing very strongly anti-migration discourse, that we also see in other European countries, that seems to have worked well.
The far right has recently scored several wins across Europe. However, Hungary is still the only member state with a single far right party that has a majority in power. Other far right parties are in coalition governments, such as in Italy, the Netherlands, Finland, Czechia, and Croatia. In both France and Germany, far right parties might not be in power yet, but have made historic wins.
For Europe at large, we see that there is, of course, a shift to the right, and we have to ask ourselves the question, why? And what to do about it. I think what is also very important is that it's very clear you cannot no longer ignore this and go back to business as usual.
It is still not clear if the FPÖ will be able to form a coalition government in Austria. However, if they do lead a coalition, they will join other far-right voices in Europe who want to tighten migration policy as well as minimize aid to Ukraine. The FPÖ joins Hungary's Viktor Orban in calling for some powers to be returned to Austria from the European Union.